consider a strange yet remarkably persistent sensation that almost every human being has experienced at least once. The sudden, unprovoked wave of acute nostalgia that hits you in the middle of a completely ordinary day. You are sitting at your desk, pouring a cup of coffee, or watching rain slide down a window pane when suddenly the texture of the present moment shifts. You are seized by a profound, heart-wrenching longing for the very second you are currently occupying. We usually brush this off as a trick of the brain, a fleeting biochemical glitch we call déjà vu. But what if your brain isn't misfiring at all? What if you are experiencing a genuine cross-temporal echo? Consider the possibility that the present moment is not happening for the first time. Imagine, instead, that you are a 90-year-old version of yourself, lying on a deathbed in a distant future, closing your eyes for the final time. And this exact second is the vivid, hyper-realistic memory your dying consciousness has chosen to revisit. What if you are not moving forward into an unknown tomorrow, but are actually remembering this very moment from a future state of consciousness? We operate under the absolute tyranny of the arrow of time. We view our lives through a strict, unyielding sequence. The past is a solid landscape that has already evaporated. The present is a razor-thin blade we walk upon, and the future is an empty void waiting to be written. This linear architecture forms the foundation of all human anxiety, driving our ceaseless striving and our deep terror of aging. Yet, if we look beneath the surface of classical physics, at the very edge of quantum mechanics and advanced metaphysics, this linear model completely fractures. The universe shows no structural preference for the forward movement of time. The equations that govern the cosmos work perfectly well in reverse. In the eyes of the universe, the future is not a vacant space. It is a destination that already exists, fully formed, casting its immense gravitational shadow backward into the territory of your present life. When we begin to treat time not as a straight line, but as an expansive, simultaneous landscape, the entire nature of human memory must be radically reimagined. We are accustomed to thinking of memory as a recording device that only points backward, archiving the relics of our yesterdays. But what if the human brain is a non-local receiver, capable of picking up vibrations from both ends of the temporal spectrum? If a future state of your consciousness already exists, it possesses a much vaster, more integrated perspective than the localized ego you occupy today. Like a traveler who has reached the summit of a mountain and looks back down at the winding path below, your future self sees the entire tapestry of your life at a single glance. Every mistake, every quiet triumph, and every forgotten afternoon is visible to that higher state of awareness. And occasionally, when the ambient noise of your daily life quietens down, the signal from the summit breaks through. This realization forces us into a profound psychological conflict with our everyday reality. If the future self is already looking back, then the choices we are making right now are not isolated events being thrown into the dark. They are notes in a symphony that has already been composed. Think of the moments in your life when you felt an inexplicable magnetic pull toward a specific city, a certain book, or a stranger whose face you had never seen before. We like to call these events coincidences or strokes of luck, but a deeper look into the architecture of retrocausality suggests a much more breathtaking explanation. These are moments where your future state of consciousness is actively reaching backward, placing a gentle hand on your shoulder and steering your physical antenna toward the destination it has already reached. You are not blindly building a path. You are being drawn toward a future that is actively remembering you. To comprehend the sheer scale of this reality shift, we must examine the limitations of our standard human perception. We experience life through the narrow lens of the biological present because our sensory organs are designed for physical survival, which requires us to perceive change sequentially. We are like viewers watching a movie frame by frame, completely absorbed in the illusion of motion, forgetting that the entire film roll already exists inside the projector. The higher state of consciousness you will occupy at the end of your journey is the entity outside the theater. It has already seen the final scene, when you experience a sudden, unprompted flash of absolute certainty, a quiet, unshakable, knowing that everything is going to be fine, despite the chaos surrounding you. You are not comforting yourself with wishful thinking. You are briefly tuning into the broadcast of the version of you that has already survived the storm. This brings us to a radical reevaluation of human suffering and regret. We spend an enormous amount of our mental energy wishing we could change the past, haunted by the ghosts of paths not taken. But if time is a unified architecture, then the healing of your life does not happen by altering what happened yesterday. It happens by changing your relationship with the observer who is watching it, all from tomorrow. The struggles you are enduring in this exact chapter of your life are the very scenes your future consciousness is replaying with the deepest reverence, tenderness, and understanding. The pain is not a structural defect of your existence. It is the raw material being refined into the wisdom of the entity you are destined to become. But if this higher, future state of awareness is constantly broadcasting its presence into our current reality, we are left with an ultimate, unresolved paradox. If the masterpiece of your life is already finished, and your future consciousness is simply looking back at the canvas, then what is the true purpose of the present moment? If you are merely remembering this second from a state of completion, what is the nature of the choices you make today, and who is the one truly deciding? To resolve this paradox, we must step outside the rigid mechanical models of the industrial era and look toward the startling frontiers of modern quantum physics. For decades, the foundational worldview of the West was built upon the clockwork universe of Isaac Newton, a cold, deterministic reality where cause strictly precedes effect, and the past acts as a line of falling dominoes, pushing us inevitably into the future. But when physicists began peering into the subatomic fabric of matter, this neat, sequential order dissolved. In the quantum realm, particles do not occupy a single, definite position in space or time. They exist as waves of probability until they are observed. More shockingly, Experiments in retrocausality, such as John Wheeler's delayed choice, thought experiments, and modern quantum erasure tests, have conclusively demonstrated that choices made by an observer in the present can actively alter the physical state of a particle in the past. This is not a mere mathematical quirk. It is a fundamental revelation about the nature of our reality grid. It proves that the universe does not store its data in a linear filing cabinet. The past and the future are locked in a continuous, reciprocal conversation, constantly rewriting one another in real time. If a physical particle can be influenced by an event that has not yet occurred, then your current human brain, which is itself an incredibly sophisticated cluster of quantum interactions, cannot be isolated from the future states of your awareness. The consciousness you will possess decades from now is not a distant, separate entity waiting for you at the end of a chronological line. It is a massive, highly coherent field of energy that is actively generating a backward resonance, organizing the probabilities of your current life to ensure its own eventual manifestation. This fluid relationship between temporal states becomes deeply intimate when we analyze the phenomenon of intuition and creative genius. Throughout history, the world's greatest thinkers, artists, and mystics have reported a strange, almost eerie sensation during their moments of highest realization. They did not feel as though they were inventing a new idea or building a concept piece by piece. Instead, they described an experience of sudden, total recollection, a feeling that the symphony, the mathematical proof, or the philosophical truth was already fully formed, somewhere in the fabric of reality, and they were simply remembering it. The ancient Greek philosophers called this anamnesis, the unforgetting of the soul. When you suddenly discover a profound truth about yourself or the universe, you are not learning anything new. You are merely tuning your antenna to the exact frequency of the wisdom your future self has already mastered and cast backward into the field. If we shift our perspective from the individual to the cosmic scale, this backward flow of consciousness reveals a stunning structural hidden pattern within reality. Consider how the universe itself evolves. We are taught that the cosmos began with a random explosion of matter that slowly, accidentally stumbled into life, intelligence, and self-awareness over billions of years. But advanced metaphysical architectures suggest the exact opposite, that the universe is pulled forward by a supreme, ultimate state of consciousness, a cosmic attractor point that already exists in a state of absolute perfection. This attractor point is like an immense gravitational well at the end of time, drawing all of creation toward itself. Your individual life is a microscopic reflection of this cosmic momentum. You are not being pushed by the trauma of your past. You are being magnetically reeled in by the perfection of your future. This understanding triggers an intense psychological conflict within the localized ego. The ego thrives entirely on the illusion of progress, building its identity upon the anxiety of what it must achieve tomorrow. It views life as a series of scarce resources that must be conquered before time runs out. But when you realize that the masterpiece of your life is already complete, and that you are simply experiencing the remembrance of it, the frantic striving of the ego completely collapses. The desperate need to control every variable, the paralyzing fear of making the wrong choice, and the crushing weight of existential pressure evaporate. You realize that you cannot permanently derail your destiny any more than a character in a book can surprise the author who already wrote the final chapter. This realization transforms our understanding of the present moment from a stressful workspace into a sacred viewing chamber. When you look at your current struggles, the financial uncertainty, the emotional heartbreak, the quiet loneliness of a difficult phase, you are no longer trapped inside the panic of the immediate experience. You are invited to look at the situation through the eyes of the future observer, who is remembering it. To that higher awareness, this difficult chapter is not a mistake to be avoided. It is a crucial, deeply beautiful movement in the symphony. It is the exact point in the story where the character gathers the necessary strength, depth, and resilience to step into their true power. By viewing your current pain through the lens of your future wisdom, you collapse the distance between the two states, instantly infusing the present moment with a sense of cosmic peace and inevitability. Yet, as we anchor ourselves in this timeless perspective and begin to feel the magnetic pull of our future self, an even more profound mystery unfolds. If our future state of consciousness is already fully formed and reaching backward to guide us, what is the nature of the medium that allows this cross-temporal communication to occur? What is the invisible architecture that connects the dying breath of the old man with the vivid, waking dream of the person sitting here right now? And how do we learn to speak its hidden language, to decipher the medium through which the future communicates with the present? We must explore the timeless symbolic languages hidden within the mystery schools of antiquity. Across disparate centuries and cultures, the initiates of ancient wisdom did not speak of time as a straight line, but as the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail. This was not a primitive metaphor for the changing seasons, but a highly sophisticated geometric blueprint of the soul's journey. The tail of the serpent represents the beginning, the raw physical incarnation, while the head represents the ultimate, perfected state of consciousness achieved at the end of the cosmic cycle. In the architecture of the Ouroboros, the head does not merely wait for the tail to arrive. It actively consumes, shapes, and guides the tail from its position of completion. The end is constantly informing the beginning. This ancient spatial understanding of time is deeply embedded in the mystical traditions of the East, particularly within the deep philosophy of the Akashic records, or what Western esotericists call the etheric blueprint. In this metaphysical framework, every thought, every emotion, and every event that has ever occurred or will ever occur is simultaneously recorded in a non-local energetic matrix. The future is not a fluid, empty space waiting to be drawn on. It is a tapestry that has already been woven into the higher dimensions of this field. When a human being experiences an authentic moment of revelation, an unprompted prophecy, or a sudden, unexplained change in life direction. They are not creating a new psychic path. They are simply aligning their energetic spine to act as a clear lightning rod, allowing a bolt of pre-existing data from the future to strike down into their physical mind. This brings us to a stunning symbolic reinterpretation of the phenomenon of déjà vu and the experience of recurring dreams. Standard materialist psychology dismisses these occurrences as simple neurological recognition errors, a brief delay in the brain's processing speed that makes a new sight feel old. But in the architecture of the timeless soul, these moments are the literal stitching points of reality. They are the structural nodes where the waking dream of the present aligns perfectly with the memory of the future observer. When you stand in a strange room and are suddenly struck by the absolute certainty that you have been there before, you are not remembering a past life. You are experiencing the exact moment your future consciousness has chosen to zoom in on. You are matching the coordinates of the memory. The old man on his deathbed has opened the ledger of his life, pointed his finger at this precise second, and your current nervous system is feeling the warmth of his gaze. This concept illuminates the true, hidden meaning behind the archetype of the guardian angel or the inner daimon found in classical mythology. For millennia, humans have reported being saved from disaster by a quiet, authoritative voice whispering in their ear, or being driven toward their destiny by an unseen, protective presence. We have externalized these forces, painting them as winged celestial beings or discarnate spirits separate from ourselves. But the esoteric truth is far more intimate. Your guardian angel is simply the fully ascended, future version of your own consciousness. It is the entity that has already lived through the human drama, survived the physical matrix, and evolved into a state of multidimensional awareness. Because it occupies a higher vantage point, it can look back down the corridor of time and see the traps, the pitfalls, and the golden opportunities long before your localized ego can perceive them. The guidance you receive in the dark is your own voice echoing backward through the centuries. This cross-temporal dialogue creates a profound tension within human awareness. It implies that our current life is a beautifully orchestrated loop of remembrance and realization. If you are experiencing this moment as a memory from the future, then the universe is not a chaotic, accidental machine where everything is falling apart. It is a highly deliberate, artistic masterwork where everything is actually coming together. The illusion of chaos only exists because we are looking at the back of the tapestry, seeing the tangled threads, the knotted strings, and the messy colors, entirely blind to the perfect geometric image that has already been completed on the other side. Yet, as we begin to perceive the outline of this grand design and recognize the backward resonance of our higher self, we are confronted with the urgent reality of our daily existence. If our future consciousness is reaching backward to guide us, how does this timeless truth manifest in the choices we make tomorrow morning? How do we practically bridge the immense gap between the localized, anxious ego of today and the calm, omniscient observer who is watching us from the end of time. To step out of the cosmic theater of speculation and into the reality of daily life, we must translate this grand temporal architecture into a practical compass for action. The realization that you are remembering this moment from a future state of consciousness is not an invitation to passive surrender or fatalism. It does not mean you can simply sit back, close your eyes, and let an automated destiny carry you forward. Rather, it demands a radical, immediate upgrade in how you handle your personal energy, your daily intentions, and the choices you make in the next 5 minutes. When you realize that your future self is actively looking back at this exact chapter of your life, the way you treat your current environment changes completely. You are no longer a victim trying to survive a random series of stressful events. You are the caretaker of a memory that your highest self holds sacred. This perspective shifts our understanding of everyday decision-making from an act of anxiety to an act of alignment. Most human beings make choices based entirely on fear. Fear of lack, fear of judgment, or fear of missing out on a hypothetical future. They run their current lives by constantly projecting their worst-case scenarios forward into tomorrow. To break free from this loop, you must learn to reverse the flow of your internal dialogue. When faced with a difficult decision, a career crossroad, or a relationship crisis, stop asking your localized, anxious ego what it wants to do. Instead, quiet the noise of your immediate mind, drop your awareness into the stillness of your chest, and consult the version of you that has already lived it. Ask yourself, how does the 90-year-old version of me look back on this moment? Which path carries the scent of wisdom, and which path is merely a repetition of an old fear? Furthermore, this cross-temporal hygiene requires us to aggressively audit the signals we are broadcasting into our field of awareness. If your future self is trying to steer you toward a state of completion, it communicates through subtle, low-frequency vibrations, flashes of quiet knowing, sudden creative clarity, and intuitive promptings that arrive in moments of complete presence. But if your daily life is entirely consumed by the high velocity, low-quality noise of the modern world, you are effectively jamming the broadcast. The constant scrolling through digital feeds, the toxic ingestion of manufactured panic, and the endless internal monologue of self-criticism create a thick layer of psychological static. You are turning the volume of the world all the way up, making it impossible to hear the gentle, backward whisper of your own evolutionary destination. To clear the static and pick up the signal from the summit, one must learn the art of intentional retrocausal anchoring. This means treating the present moment as a pristine laboratory for the future. When you sit down to work, when you speak to someone you love, or when you simply walk through a quiet park, do so with the deliberate awareness that you are currently visiting a deeply nostalgic memory. Notice the exact temperature of the air, the specific pattern of the light on the wall, and the precise texture of your breath. By bringing absolute, unadulterated presence to the second you are occupying, you open a wide, clean channel through the space-time grid. You meet your future consciousness halfway. You stop acting like a blind actor, stumbling through a script, and you become the conscious co-author, fully awake inside the dream of your life. This practice completely rewrites the human relationship with adversity and failure. When you hit a wall in your life, when a project collapses, a door slams shut, or a period of deep isolation sets in, the linear mind immediately panics and declares, "Something is broken." But the future observer knows that this precise collapse was the necessary demolition before the true architecture could be built. To the entity looking back from the end of time, the failure was the pivot point. It was the exact moment you were forced to shed an identity that was too small for you. By adopting this memory-centric framework, you can walk through the heaviest storms with a quiet, knowing smile, recognizing that the current script is simply executing the mandatory setups required for a spectacular third act. Yet, as you master this practical alignment and begin to feel the tangible, comforting weight of your future self pulling you forward, a final, reality-bending threshold presents itself. If the current moment is a memory being replayed by a higher state of awareness, what happens when the memory ends? What occurs when the current scene catches up to the very edge of the cosmic projector? And what is the ultimate revelation that awaits us when the line between the old man remembering and the person living completely disappears? The true weight of this temporal journey lands the moment the line between the old man remembering and the person living completely collapses. For your entire life, the linear mind has forced you to run away from the past and chase after the future, keeping you trapped in a perpetual state of lack. But as you step into absolute presence, you realize that the future you have been desperately trying to build is not a destination you are arriving at. It is the very consciousness that is currently dreaming you into existence. The search is over because the finish line has already run backward to meet you at the start. You are not a fragile, temporary creature desperately collecting moments before the clock runs out. You are the timeless author, rereading your own favorite book, fully aware of how beautifully every single thread resolves in the end. This realization delivers the final reality-shifting revelation of our expedition. The ultimate state of consciousness from which you are remembering this moment is not located at a physical point in linear time. It is not waiting for your body to grow old, wither, and decay on a distant hospital bed. The future state is simply the eternal, multi-dimensional dimension of your own soul that exists entirely outside of time right now. It is the permanent, quiet witness that stands behind every birth, every death, and every transient human experience. When you finally close your eyes to leave this physical matrix, you will not travel to a foreign heaven or dissolve into nothingness. You will simply wake up to the realization that you never left home. You will remember that this entire, decades-long human drama was a single, intensely beautiful thought held in the vast, silent ocean of your own infinite awareness. This understanding permanently alters the way you occupy the remaining chapters of your physical script. You no longer walk through this life with the heavy, fearful posture of a survivor. You move with the light, effortless grace of a lucid dreamer. The societal expectations that once felt like heavy chains are revealed to be cheap stage props. The judgments, the metrics of artificial success, and the manufactured panics of the marketplace lose their power to disturb your frequency. You can look directly at the heavy storms of human history and the quiet trials of your personal life with an unshakable cosmic peace. You know, with absolute certainty, that the masterpiece has already been painted, the song has already been sung, and the victory has already been won in the higher architectures of reality. As you step away from this documentary and return to the immediate environment around you, the illusion of sequential time will inevitably try to reassert its grip. The clock on the wall will tick, a deadline will loom, and the modern world will demand that you resume the frantic, anxious race toward tomorrow. But the architecture of your perception has been permanently altered. The next time you find yourself caught in a wave of sudden, unprovoked nostalgia on an ordinary afternoon, do not dismiss it as a phantom trick of the mind. Sit perfectly still. Feel the profound cosmic weight of the second you are occupying, and look back through the eyes of the one who is watching. If this entire life is a memory, make it something beautiful to remember.